Welcome back, Idiot Squared viewers. This week we have another banger episode on the allure of power. Why is it that some people seek to gain so much power while others don't seek to gain much at all? This episode, we're going to explore why and how and try and develop a deeper understanding. So, Polska, are you ready to dive deep into the allure of power?
It's a really multifaceted concept, and here on Idiot Squared, we don't really like to say things are neither good or bad. I think we kind of like to lean on whether or not it's useful or not useful. And this kind of got me thinking, when is power useful? Like, when do you see it being used responsibly and ethically?
I think power is useful by default. Like that's what makes it alluring, is the usefulness of it. But when is it used responsibly and ethically? Oh fuck, man, I have no idea. Like I just don't. I genuinely don't. But I think like power is incredibly useful, which means you can use it for good or bad, so to speak. But yeah, that's essentially it. Like it's so damn useful. That's why it's so damn attractive for people to get. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. But so that's one part of it. The other part is with humans is, why is there a spectrum of people who seek to gain not much power or little to no power, or give up their power, so to speak. And then there's other people who seek to gain massive amounts of it, like huge levels of power, over others, over society, and over the trajectory of, human evolution and development, so to speak.
Would you rather have immense amount of money or an immense amount of power?
Good question. I feel like power is probably, so money is useful in the sense that like you can essentially buy time from other people, so to speak, or you can exchange it for almost anything. Whereas power, and you can exchange money for power, but like power in and of itself, you just had massive amounts of it. I don't know if you'd need money. So I think maybe for me, it would be power.
Well, they say like in the Western world, money can buy power. But in China, for example, power controls the money, right?
Correct.
So I could see why if you were in China, someone who wants to sort of make it big is going to have to get the power first to control the money. Whereas in like the Western world, you can, really work your fucking ass off, get that money, and then with that money you can get power, right? But if we were just like to separate the two concepts completely, if I think initially people would strive more towards just wanting the money aspect of it, over the power. Maybe, I'm not really sure why. I just feel like that's a general quick answer that people would come up with, is like, oh, I would just want to have a lot of money, right? And for some reason, once rich people, or so they say, I wouldn't know, but they say that rich people who get upwards, to the highest 0.1%, they're not looking for more money. They're like, things change, and now they suddenly strive for having more power. That's what kind of gets them out of bed in the morning, is the concept of control and power that they can attain.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, definitely. I think that the reason why most people would say money is because, well, it's, for most people, more money would seem to solve a bunch of their problems. But we often conflate, having more money with solving all of our problems, when all more money will do is solve your money problems. Lots of people's problems, a percentage of people's problems may or may not be money related. So like if you're struggling to put food on the table and a roof over your head, well, then more money will help you with that, and that'll solve those problems. But if your problems are deeper, they're more like intrinsic, you have no purpose and meaning, or you are insecure, or you feel less than in society, et cetera, and it's not related to money, then getting more money isn't necessarily going to solve those problems. So I'm pretty sure it's a Naval quote, which is like, money only solves money problems.
Yeah, it's true. It's an interesting concept because people who want to obtain health will sacrifice health in order to get wealth first. So they'll say, "Oh, I'm going to work my fucking ass off and sacrifice my health because once I have the money, then I can invest into my health," right? And it's sort of like a double-edged sword kind of concept, if I can use that term there.
Well, yeah, they sort of short term giving it up so that hopefully long term they could have it. And sometimes that might work, but other times it may not. And it doesn't mean like, just because you can get there that way doesn't mean it's the only way to get there. Like you could still be healthy and not have to make the same sort of sacrifices or to the same degree and still get the outcomes. Maybe you just, extend your time horizon or something. But I do think that for a lot of people, like, that money is an issue. Like if people had just a bit more money, it might take a bit of pressure off people. But then on top of that, it's like, learning to manage money or deal with having a certain amount of money is a skill in and of itself. So you like, we've discussed this before on the pod, but if you look at people who have won the lottery, there's plenty of research that's being done on people that have won the lottery, and they interview them, a year or two or three, or, post winning the lottery, and they're like way more unhappy than before they won the lottery. Right. And they, you'd think that winning the lottery would be like the best thing ever, but like, it typically isn't for most people. It tends to cause more problems, that it solves. Right. Like, because they just don't have the skills to deal with or manage that money or use it appropriately or not get scammed or, like there's just so many different things that come with it.
I've heard stories of guys winning the lottery and then going to Vegas. Like, why would you go? Like, you just won money. Like, stay off the tables. I don't get why you would win a lottery and then go to Vegas to like blow it at casinos. Like, I guess it's just for the thrill, but it just seems like such a stupid concept to win the lottery and then go to blow it at casinos. Right?
Yeah, but if you're a gambling addict and you're addicted to gambling or betting or whatever, and that's why you do the lottery, then you get it. You're like, holy shit! Like if I could double this, I'll be so much better off. Or I could triple this, or if it's just an addiction, like for some people, it's easy come, easy go in that regard. Like and that's like they might be addicted to that rush, that high from putting that amount of money on the line, or like that like that's the behavioral loop that they're stuck in. Hence why when they win the lottery, they just continue that behavioral pattern. Like I think it's common for people to think that I get this, if I get this amount of money, I'll change. Like everything about me will change. It's like probably not. It's probably just going to amplify whatever you've already been doing, which comes back to your point that whole like, I'll sacrifice my health to make money so that I can be healthy later. It's like, no, like a lot of the time the trick is to just like start doing the behaviors you really want to have and want to hard code so that like you can practice and get better at them over time, instead of like, oh no, all of a sudden when I get a certain amount of money, I'll switch to doing those behaviors. Like, no, like probably the best time to start is now and just like practice.
Yeah, exactly. So when I asked you if you rather have immense amount of money or immense amount of power, you said power, right? So why did you choose power?
Well, because I think that power is probably more useful. Like money is useful in our world and our society because we've made it something that we can exchange for other people's time and energy, goods and services. Like money is kind of like universal in that regard. But I think that power is probably more universal in some sense. And like you could probably like there's some things money can't buy, probably. And there's and then like so power probably can get you those things. Now, I answered your question just to provide an answer. I don't necessarily lust for many of those things. Like, that's something I battled with in my life, is like, I don't really have that much of an intrinsic sort of drive for power or money. And it's always fascinated me about people that do, because it hasn't been something that I've like had this deep burning desire to acquire, if that makes sense. Like, I've wanted to acquire money and or power indirectly to a certain level, but that's just for a quality of life. That was really it. And so, like, when I got that quality of life, it was kind of like, oh, like, awesome. Now I can enjoy all that quality of life. But I wasn't driven to keep going any further, if that makes sense. Whereas there are people in the world and throughout history that seem to have like a never-ending desire for more and more money and power, if that makes sense.
100%. I think what happens a lot of the times in those circumstances is that people who begin to have power, they usually have people around them that are sort of following, their lead. They become like a natural leader, or they become a leader in some way. And the people that begin to come around them are people who probably want to share in that power. And what's it called? And because of that, indirectly, they're going to be making probably money from this power that's being gained, right? So suddenly you have a lot of people around you that are applauding you, that are honoring you, and you probably start to begin to feel God-like in a sense, because everyone who's coming around you is trying to get on your team and trying to get like in the good books with you and trying to, sort of keep this ship going, or, keep this train going. And you get people telling you things that are just blowing up your head, your ego, more so. And you begin to think that what you're doing is good, and what you're doing is changing a lot of people's lives and making the people's lives around you better. And I'm not saying it's not, right? But I'm just saying that I think that contributes to sort of this power hunger thing, because you just, wow, like I'm doing all these crazy cool things, and everyone around me is just honoring me and just making me want to keep going and do more and more and more. And suddenly it becomes this addiction, right? And this sort of addiction to power can have a great effect, a great positive effect and a great negative effect on the people around you. And maybe not just the people around you, but the people that are, in the community and in the country. Because
Guy, I lost you for a second. We're back.
what I was saying was, people who are in powerful positions, right? I think their ego sort of gets inflated, and that's affected by the people around them, because the people around them are trying to continue steering the ship in this sort of power direction. And I think things that they say and do will sort of inflate the ego of the person who's in the power position, right? And they're going to make that person feel somewhat godlike. So whether or not the power that is being gained is having a positive or negative effect on the community as a whole, I think that sort of gets blinded by this addiction that begins to form of wanting more and more power, right? Because if you have it, let's say that you're in a huge building, top floor building, New York. Every time someone comes into your office, they're just sucking your dick, right? They're there to just suck your dick the whole time. So you think that you are this,
Or your clit. Suck your clit, guy.
yeah,
If you're a power woman,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I just think that people just get more and more power hungry because of the immediate dopamine responses that they're getting day to day from people adoring them and honoring them, right?
Yeah, I think that definitely plays a role. And for different people, different situations, it'll be, more or less of an influence, right? The other thing with it is power in and of itself can be quite addictive, just because it allows you to do more and get more. But I feel like if we go deeper and deeper and deeper into it, we sort of get to this point where it's like there has to be a level of, I'm going to say ignorance, where like you have to be sufficiently ignorant to want to gain more and more and more power, I think, because, you try to like understand, like develop a deeper understanding of life and the universe and all the rest of it. You sort of realize it's like you don't really know if something you're doing is good or bad in the moment. Only time will sort of tell, and then like the way you choose to look at it will define whether it was good or bad. And so you could do these things that you're thinking are really good, and you can be like going 100% into that, but then there could be all these unintended consequences, like that could end up being really bad, and then it could be harsh and sad and the rest of it. Whereas like I think you have to be kind of ignorant in that regard to like, have blinders on and just really go for something. Like, and I think that's what is part of that allure for power. Like the more you sort of think about it, the more you realize like, oh shit, there's no way of really knowing, the good or the bad in the moment. But I don't, it's a very complicated topic. And so I do have some brief like overview stuff that we can sort of chat on. Okay. So like there's we can break it down into like a couple of different factors, right? So we've got psychological factors, socio-cultural factors, biological factors, philosophical and existential factors, and economic factors, right? So in different contexts, right, like these will have different roles, but they all sort of they're all sort of in the same space, overlapping and composing together, if that kind of makes sense. So like what is it that like what I can understand the allure of power, but what is it about a person that separates them from wanting, just some power to immense amounts of power, right? Guys, I think it's safe to say that for your average person, they don't really want huge amounts of power. Like they just want enough power to have some autonomy in their life. And I think that, some autonomy in their life and then enjoy the little things, so to speak. Like your average person has been quite content just, like finding a partner, procreating, having children, and having a good life. Like I think that's like, your middle class, so to speak. Like that's what, the American dream and all those different things, like they're all built off that kind of thing. It's like, have a nice place to live, have food on the table, and be able to have some quality time with your family, and raise your children in a relatively safe environment, right? Like I feel like for most people that's enough. And that's not a huge amount of power, is it? Whereas you have these outliers of people who seek to gain massive amounts of power. And I want to understand, like, what is it about those people? What is different about those people that leads to them wanting to do that? And I don't know if it's good or bad. Like, again, like we don't really know. Is it useful? Like, I think, in certain cases you need people like, arguably Elon Musk has a fair bit of power, right? And he seems to be using that power to do, relatively useful things, in my opinion. Will there be unintended negative consequences? Yes. So like he's building Tesla electric cars. They have, autonomous abilities. In the development of those autonomous vehicles, and the training it goes into that, people have died. Like the computers have made mistakes. But in training the ability to autonomously drive with machine learning and the rest of it, will we lead to having fewer road deaths? Possibly, right? So then you got to get into this philosophical debate of like, oh, okay, is those people dying in the process of training worth it for the long-term outcome of less people dying on the roads, right? And these are all really hard things to untangle. So we're not going to jump into that today, but like, I'm just trying to like set the stage a little bit with it. So if all of that sort of makes a bit of sense, we'll go into this. So psychological factors, right? So some individuals may have a heightened need for control over their environment and other people. This could be driven by underlying fears, insecurities, or past experience where they felt powerless. Another aspect of the psychological factors is narcissistic traits. So a sense of entitlement, a need for constant admiration, and a lack of empathy or compassion, I would say, could drive someone to seek power and wealth as a way to validate their own self-worth, right? So one thing, there's a good book by Robert Greene, which is The 48 Laws of Power. Really fascinating book. But within that, you sort of, these got the 48 Laws of Power and then the Laws of Human Nature, right? And if you read both of those books, you can gain some interesting insights into human nature and the laws of power. But like the narcissistic stuff is interesting. So if you look on social media, you will typically find people that are present with these narcissistic traits, where what they're really doing is they're relying on other people's opinions and feedback to validate themselves, right? So they're relying on external things to validate themselves. And arguably that's because intrinsically they aren't able to do it for themselves, right? So they don't know how to do that for themselves. So they rely on all these other people to do it for them. Yeah. And so they end up doing behaviors that play to people so they can get those people to do the validation for them. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. As you were saying that, I was thinking, what types of people do you find go for that narcissistic type of power? Who would fall into the narcissistic category, right? And you're right. It could be people on social media platforms that
business, government, like law, like any position where you can gain power from being in that structure. And it's like, you look at it and just think about it in terms of games people play, right? So like if you're playing a game where you're trying to impress a bunch of other people, not necessarily because it's something you truly want to be doing, but because by impressing those people, it validates you.
Right.
Right. But there's another way of doing that, which is like, I really love law or whatever. And I think that things could be done. Like I've studied the history of it and I can see where things have gone wrong previously. And I think that there can be slight tweaks can be made that will make this system, more useful for more people kind of thing, or more productive. And you do it for that reason. You don't really care what other people think about you. That's a different motivator, different driver for doing the same kind of job. And I think the outcomes are different too. Whereas what ends up happening is it's like, there's this group of people, I really want them to like me, so I'm going to play to that. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And what you said is really interesting, because I feel like if we had a political leader who sort of gave up something to show people that he's in it for the right reasons, I don't know what that thing could be, but in a sense, show people that they're not in it for X, Y, Z, that they're actually in it to sort of make a positive change. Okay, for example, let's take Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk suddenly, actually, it's a bad example, but anyways, Elon Musk suddenly steps down from his SpaceX position, his Tesla position, to become a politician, right? So he's giving away all of this power and money that he's generated because he now wants to do something to because he believes in himself and he believes that he can make a much larger positive change than the current politicians can, right? So he's giving up this big position of power to sort of do this selfless pursuit. And I feel like if a politician was able to do that, people would be a lot more likely to follow them, and it would show that they're not just some power hungry or money hungry person, because they've given that up.
Yeah. So I think that the people that should be in positions of power should be exemplars, right? Like they should be exemplars of what it means to live like a purposeful, meaningful life. The people that are in positions in public health should be exemplars of health. Like they should be obsessed in some degree, or to some degree, sorry, with health and living a healthful lifestyle and understanding what that means, and you can look at people who are in positions of power within public health and realize that they're really not. And it just shows, like you can get to these positions without having that as your thing. And I think part of that is because they see that like, oh, if I get this position, then people will respect me. I'll be in this position of power. I'll get all this sort of stuff. And that's like, they're sort of trying to cheat the system, if that makes sense, which is like what you were saying, they want to be healthy, but like they got to do really unhealthy things to then get money so that then when they got money, they can become healthy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a similar kind of thing. It's a difficult topic, but yes. So the narcissistic stuff, I think you see it lots in society. Whenever you're sort of relying on, other people to define your self-worth and validate you, I think that hints at narcissism.
Yeah, if that is the driving force of you wanting to gain power, that can be dangerous, because having power really does affect a lot of people around you. So everyone, I think narcissism is probably a spectrum. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's hard to identify where the line is between unhealthy narcissism and more healthy narcissism. So it's really difficult to sort of put a pin on it when someone is too narcissistic to be in a power position, right? When does someone have a healthy level of narcissism so they can, be in that power position and not negatively affect a lot of people around them?
Okay, so I think like we discussed with lots of things, it's a balance, right? It's a balance between, those things. Okay. So with that, when is it, a healthy level of narcissism or not? I think most of the time it's like the people that don't want to be in the positions of power probably should. And the people that really want to be in those positions of power probably shouldn't. I think that's a good indicator.
Yeah, good call.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, it's funny because it's kind of like, that's not like necessarily obvious, but like, I think that really is part of it. Like, but then you realize like, okay, the people that don't really want to be, they're content doing, other simpler stuff. And it's the people that really want that position of power are the ones who are going to do whatever they can to get there, which is why they end up there. And it's probably not the best thing. That kind of makes sense.
Absolutely. That's crazy, right? It's a crazy concept, but I tend to agree with you. Like, look at Rogan. Rogan would be a badass politician, but he doesn't want to fucking do it because he's too smart to not want to do it, right? But he would be really good in that power position.
Yeah, yes, I tend to agree with you, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know if he's too smart. I feel like part of the problem is that, and we've discussed this before about like governments and businesses and corporations and countries and things like that. They're these power structures or structures. Power structures is probably the better way to say it. That can persist throughout time, greater than the lifespan of a human, right? So governments are a power structure that if you, as a human, as a person, can get into a position within that, allows you to amplify and project massive amounts of power, greater than what you could, sort of obtain by yourself without that structure. And so then it becomes like a competition to get into these positions. And so part of that with Rogan is, I think, like part of getting into government, the rest of it is like you actually have to abide by their rules to a degree. You have to play their game. You sort of, part of it is like they won't let you in there in a position of power unless you're going to play by those kinds of rules. If that makes sense. This is like a thing that we saw with Donald Trump, like when he started to try and expose a bunch of stuff, corruption and things, what did he call it? The swamp or whatever, or the cesspool. They, like the whole system sort of went against him. And so it's like an immune system, And so I think when you meant to say Rogan's too smart, like I think he probably wouldn't do the politics. That's probably like why he wouldn't, is because He's like, it's not worth it. Like maybe you need a different kind of way of going about it. Like, is the system even reformable? Is getting someone that gets it, or like has a different allure to power, doesn't necessarily want that power, putting them in that position, will that solve it? I don't fucking know. I feel like I just tied myself in a knot with all of that. But anyway, it's an interesting concept, but I think our incentive systems are a bit messed up at the moment. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely, bro. Like look at if we look at the left and the right, as soon as the like we'll just say the right gets into power, right? Then the left is doing everything they can so the right doesn't, get the policies in place that they want to make, the changes that they want to make. And then when the left is in power, the right does the exact same thing. So every time, like let's take a ship, for example, right? To turn a ship around, it takes a lot of work to try and turn the ship around. And as soon as the right gets into power, they might be able to dial it like this, but the whole time the left is trying to keep it going this way. So it's very hard to turn the ship around. It's very difficult to make significant changes because there's this constant battle between left and right. But all at the same time, the real power structure, the corporations, the what's it called? The industrial complex, the military
industrial complex.
Yeah.
Countries.
And like BlackRock, Vanguard, who own pretty much fucking everything now. They're the ones calling the shots, really. So, this whole left versus right is just a clown show at this point. But it's really hard to vote somebody in and then get like significant changes done when all of this, when there's like fucking circus going on. And all in the meanwhile, like I said, these big corporations are the ones pulling all the strings.
And on top of that, like when the people you can pick from are people who are wanting this power, and by our sort of definition that we just discussed, it's like that they probably shouldn't be the ones in the position of power. Like you kind of need a system that inverse does it. Like you've got all these people that are running or whatever they really want. It's like, how do you find the people that really don't want to run? Because they're not requiring all of this external gratification or they're not seeking that power, but they would really be a good fit because they really don't want it. Like, and they, if that makes sense, I don't know. It's a weird sort of inverse problem. That was just that was a number one. That was our psychological factors, right? There's another one in the psychological factors, which is insecurity and compensation. So for some, the pursuit of power might be an attempt to compensate for feelings of inadequacy or insecurity. Accumulating power or wealth may be seen as a way to prove oneself or to gain acceptance and admiration. Now, that's one side of it. And on the other side of it, it's like you can want to gain power because you can see ways things could be done differently, or you could see ways to help people, and you can want to project power because of that too. So what I sort of want to get on with is there's an allure for power, and I think it's a spectrum as well. And you can have it for this, the insecurity style stuff, or you can have it as a mechanism to project power to do useful and beneficial things. And I think that you can, on one end with the insecurity and stuff, you can sell yourself on doing it for grandiose reasons when really it's an internal problem. And on the other end of the spectrum, you're truly doing it for those intrinsic reasons of like, oh, like this is going to help us change the lives of millions of people or steer society in a direction that you really believe it should go in. And it, whether it's good or bad, that's only time will tell, so to speak. But, by having the ability to do that is a useful thing, right? So having the ability for people to gain power and do that is useful. I'm not saying we shouldn't allow people to gain power or anything like that, but people can do it for, useful and less useful reasons, so to speak. And I think if you're doing it because of the insecurity stuff, I think that should be a bit of a red flag. And the point I'm trying to make with that is it's on the surface, to me, from my limited perspective, it seems as if the common allure for people in positions of power, or the common people who try to get to these positions of power, may be doing it because of insecurities and fear and other internal things that aren't satisfiable, if that makes sense. That kind of summarized my point a bit.
Yeah, 100%. You know who's a dangerous person?
Who?
Somebody who is a nerd and got bullied their entire lives and then is suddenly in a great position of power.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Well, anyone that was like that.
Yeah, right. Because suddenly, it's going back to what you said. One of the reasons for them wanting to have power could be that the self-esteem issue, right? And if someone has been bullied throughout school, this is sort of like the revenge. Oh yeah, I'll show you motherfuckers, you know? And that's sort of
Yeah.
their motivation. I'm kind of curious. Do you think people are still bullying nerds these days? Like if you went into a high school, like does the nerd still get bullied? I feel like the nerd would be cool now.
I don't know because I'm not in schools, but I would assume that bullying is still occurring. I can't imagine, well, yeah, I can't imagine a world where it doesn't occur. And I don't think that all bullying is bad. I think that it's like a necessary sort of feedback mechanism. And, I think banter, which is, could be classified as a form of soft bullying in some regard, is necessary for error correction. Like I think it's not all bad, if that makes sense. But yeah, I would say that it still is that. I think nerds are definitely like the new knights. Back in the day, we had the knights of the round table and all the rest of it go out and forge all the battles and things, or fight the battles. Sorry. Whereas like nerds nowadays, like if you're sufficiently intelligent and have the ability to focus in on something, you can really cause massive change in the world and gain power from that indirectly or directly. So yeah, I don't know. You mentioned something just then. Okay, so the bullying thing, like dangerous person is like a nerd who was bullied and then gets a lot of power. Definitely can be, but at the same time, they could do it for revenge, or they could have a different motivator, which would be instead of revenge, it's like, oh, I went through this pain and I'd like to, do something to minimize other people unnecessarily going through this. Right?
It's a great point.
But on the same hand, that nerd going through all of that bullying and all of that hardship, how much of that influenced them and forced or put them in a position where they could develop the necessary skills to gain the power? So was that a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a great point. It's all individualistic, right? It's like we always say, nothing is neither good or bad. It's how you use it. So yeah,
what
I
you make of
definitely
it.
agree. Yeah, what we make of it. So yeah, I definitely agree. That for sure happens a lot, right? For sure happens a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also like mad curious about this Allure of Power 2 groups. And I've always been as well. Like, I guess one of the driving forces, we sort of just hit on it a little bit, is that, right? Someone who sort of wants to, maybe in a revenge type of way, act on it in a positive or a negative way. And if they do act on it in a positive way, that is a good thing, or that's a useful thing, right? So in that circumstance,
Or it's more likely to be useful.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's a well-known thing that hardships, or any types of hardships, it's a motivating factor for people to get out of those hardships to make their own lives better, and in many ways to make the lives better of the people around them, right? That's why you see people who've come from impoverished immigrant families make killer businessmen, because they've gone through the hardships, right? Or even people who are just born in impoverished areas or were bullied. Any type of hardship can be a huge motivating factor and drive people to strive to be in power positions, to want to make things better, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. And so this is, I'm trying to untangle this in real time, which is difficult. But there seems to be like the allure for power, like, we're not going to deny that it's there. It's definitely there. But there seems to be like two ends of a spectrum, which is like, one is you're trying to satisfy something within yourself, some sort of insecurity or something. And then so the allure for power could be like, oh, I really want to, solve this problem, or I really want to, help this field or discover this thing. And that's what drives you. And you're doing that because of the intrinsic satisfaction to yourself. But then there's another aspect of it where it's like you want power because you want people to respect you, you want people to see you a certain way, or you want validation from them, but for a different mechanism. It's not based off like this desire to improve humanity or anything else. It's an entirely sort of, what would the word be?
It's a narcissistic.
Yeah. Yes. And so it's kind of like for the wrong reasons. That makes sense.
Yeah, like for some sort
like
of acceptance or to feel accepted.
Yeah. Well, so like I think one example might be like, you're use two popular names in the media currently. Like you've got your Elon and your Joe Biden. Like you mentioned the Elon running for president kind of thing. So I think like Elon does it, like he genuinely is driven because he wants the world to be, he wants humanity, consciousness, and the world to be different. He can see a different future for humanity, and he wants to put his effort towards that, right? Because that's the world that he wants to live in. And then, whereas if you've got a Biden who I don't really know what the fuck he wants. You know what I mean? Like, what's he really passionate about? Like, what's something that's really driving him? Like so he's in a position of power, like he's the president of the United States. Well, like, is there anything that he really like that's big and meaningful or greater than him? Like, is he aiming for something that's greater than him? Like, is he trying to steer humanity in this direction that leads to, bigger and better things, right? And I don't see that, but he's in a position of power. Whereas if you got your Elon, who seems to have like these clear, tangible things, like he's quite open about saying that he, like we are the only example of, the light of consciousness that we know of in the universe. And so trying to preserve that is very important. And so becoming multiplanetary is an important part of that. It's like having a backup system, like we're doing a backup, so to speak. And so he's really allocating time and energy to try and solve that problem. Whereas like your Biden seems to just be like, in it for the power, so to speak, not necessarily trying to direct it in any sort of, useful direction.
God, we don't know what the fuck Biden wants because there's no long format content with Biden. Like there's only these clips and, these not conferences, but I can't remember what the word is, but there's only like short clips of Biden speaking. And it's usually, something that when he speaks from the heart, it's always like cringe lately. It's always something weird. And he's saying like strange shit and doesn't make sense. So we don't know what the fuck he wants because he can't express himself correctly.
It's precisely. So someone who's not even in touch with themselves or hasn't faced those battles or demons within themselves, should someone like that be in power? Like the reason, like, I'm a bit of an Elon fanboy, but it's mainly because like he does fucking cool shit at scale. Like I just have to respect that. Like he's got the ability to do shit. It's amazing. Part of the reason why Elon's done it is because when he was younger, like he had all these existential crises. Like he's been through similar stuff that I think, a fair percentage of humans have sort of had, but we just sort of compartmentalize it or push it down. We don't like explore it. Whereas he really faced it, like he's like, fuck, are we alone? Like, like, are we the only example of consciousness? Like, what does it mean to be alive? What is the universe, etc.? Like all these deep questions that, as humans, we all have access to. And, like we can all ask these questions. It's a a human problem, so to speak. And through going through that suffering and that battle, he's realized like, well, the only thing that I can really do is like, I can learn about this and I can try and make these things. I can try and solve this problem. I can try and do this. I can try and do that. And I can put time and energy and resources towards doing all of these things. And I can aim for the stars, because the worst thing that happens is I fail and we're in the same position we were if I didn't try, kind of thing, Whereas like, I don't see that from the Biden, like all you see is clips of him like chatting up kids or whispering shit in their ears.
Oh, dude. Yeah. When he's smelling kids, like
don't tell your mom what I said.
Yeah, it's unreal. I can't believe how many clips there are.
Yeah, no, it's odd. It's really odd. But like, this is what I'm, like, you don't really know what he stands for. They're just sound bites. They're just like talking points that are selected by somebody else. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
That's my concern. Like, people like that in positions of power are concerning. Whereas like, I'm down for you, sort of like, slightly more autistic kinds of guys or girls, aiming for the stars.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because I learned this from watching House of Cards, that there is this sort of perception that the public needs to have of somebody in order for them to get elected. So they have to check mark certain boxes, right? One of the things is that they're married or they have a family. So it's a family guy, right? And they have to portray that they have a healthy family, or they've had a success, or they're successfully having a healthy family. So it's appearances. Like they have to check, like the check mark all of these like appearance types of things in order for the public to sort of accept them and have trust in them. But if you have someone that's sort of more, autistic, like you were saying, it's going to be hard for the public to sort of get on board with that person, because they don't fall into this template sort of politician that for some reason the public continues to fall in love with.
Well, that's not relatable, right?
Yeah, but that's the point.
Yeah, that's like, I know. Trust me. I know, right? Like, you don't want the guy that's just like you to be in the position of power, so to speak. If you're just like an average kind of person that doesn't really think of anything greater than the rest of that stuff. You kind of like, you want. You don't really know, because you're not concerned with these things. You don't really know who should be. You know what I mean? Like, it's not okay. It's easier to project an image that convinces people. Like, it's like a honeypot, right? Like, we've cottoned on to the fact that like most people aren't allocating the time and energy to truly try and understand any of these things. Okay. They're happy to just be sold something. And so then if you can like tick these boxes, and you can project or present an image or a story, then people will want to believe that. And that's why we sort of end up with the people that we end up with. Now, the crazy left of field, super passionate kind of person probably isn't relatable to as many people, right? Because they're so different from the average person. But that's kind of like, I know what you need, but it's also kind of dangerous too, because you can end up with like a Hitler. Like, so it's a tough thing because it could swing both sort of ways. But like, the whole like happy family thing, it's like, it looks good from far, but it's far from good. Like, I don't know if you've seen the White House videos of when they're on the balcony.
Yeah.
and Hunter's just racing guy. Like, he's got a lot of potential energy in that body, like he was racing.
He's there with his fucking family. Like, there's kids there. Like, I think his wife was holding a baby, or someone around him was holding a baby. Biden's there. They're on the balcony. Buddy turns around, and we can't confirm if he was snorting coke, but we all know that the guy is fucking doing drugs. So whether or not he snorted coke on that balcony, like when he turned around to sniff something, regardless, we know that he was blowing lines at that party regardless. It's just crazy.
Well, apparently somebody left some of the substance behind.
Yeah,
afterwards. The cleaners found it, right?
that's right.
Okay, so
That's right.
I think, like, on one end of the spectrum, there's people like that who are the allure of power gets, right? And then you've got the other people like who are probably, I don't know if I don't know if it's a stronger motivator, but like let's just bag it into like your Elongs and your, like there's many of these figures throughout history, right? But people like even Julian Assange and things like that, like, that he saw some stuff that he was like, okay, this is sketchy. I'm going to, present this to the world, okay, and sacrifice myself. The only reason you would do that is because intrinsically you felt you had to do that, right? And so I think that's another allure to power. And like he sacrificed a lot, like he's been locked up for a long time now, but like he's being prosecuted because he's gone against the system. I'm fucking butchering this whole thing. But anyway, I think that I'm trying to separate. There's two spaces of people that have like a big allure for it. And I think, one side of that, like, it's a way to describe this. Trying to get away from good and bad, right? Like useful and uselessness, like useful and less useful. I think it's clear with your bite, like, okay, let's use Hunter as an example, right? Easy example to use. This guy is clearly into the power thing to feed his own egotistical, like, dopaminergic needs, like clearly there's videos of him smoking crack. There's videos of him with hookers. There's videos of him with all this other stuff. Like he's just chasing his own dopaminergic. He's a slave to dopamine essentially, right? Like he's a slave to that reward mechanism. That's why he's doing all like the things that he does. Yeah. And then you get your other people who aren't necessarily driven by that, but are driven because of like this grander, more purposeful and meaningful results. And I think if we could shift our incentives into society to support more of those people that have that the grand expanding the space of possibilities for humanity, trying to solve big problems and do novel things. I think if we could shift the incentives toward that more, I think we would have a very different society.
I just feel like I have to go back to the Biden blowing lines on the balcony thing.
Yeah, so, let's do it.
No, just because I just wanted to say that I'm down, like, for doing drugs recreationally, and I don't judge anybody if they want to live their life that way. Like it's all good, and I think that you would tend to agree with that. But just it's like there's a time and a place. Like, buddy, there's cameras all over you. You got your family there. You're in the fucking White House. Like, as badass as it would be to do, blowing lines in the White House, and I would love to go to the White House and do some cocaine with Hunter. But like, it's just the way it's just such a bad look, dude. You know what I mean? Like, it's unreal the level of ego or the level of like not giving a fuck. That's taking place.
Yeah, but it's also go finish.
No,
Sorry.
That's it.
Okay, so I agree with you, but like, isn't it fucking crazy that that's not enough for him? Like, just like being at the White House, having that whole thing, like that's not he's got to be fucking racking. Like he's got to be on it. Like, how isn't being at the White House with all of that enough? Like he's so desensitized, or he's, like his threshold is so high for the rush that he needs to add in the drugs there. You know what I mean? Like you said, like I'm not judging people for doing drugs. I think, the recreational use can be useful and fun in certain contexts and in situations, right? But if that's what you're always trying to do, then I think that's when it becomes the problem. So the fact that like that should be a rush being at the White House, your dad is president and all of these things, like that should be such an amazing feeling, but then he's got to do all this other stuff on top of that because he's so desensitized. Like,
yo,
that's fucked up.
You just said something and just made me connect the dots. Guy, imagine that your dad owned a business and it was like a anniversary party or something for the business, and you went there with a bag of cocaine. Like like imagine being at your dad's anniversary business party and all of the business guys are there, all of his employees are there, and there's just you behind him, just blowing lines out in the open like that. Like, think about how fucked up that is. You know what I mean? Like I said, there's a time and a place for things, but you just at the White House, I don't know, guys. It's wild.
But why? Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, what is it? And I think like this is an example of the wrong allure for power. Like where it really is there's this massive void within themselves that is unfillable, and they try and fill it through all the wrong ways, which is why it never gets satisfied.
Well,
whereas, like, I think your Elon has a similar sort of void or hole, but by pursuing purpose and meaning, he quenches it to some degree. Does that kind of make sense? Whereas, like, on that other end, it's unquenchable because they're never doing the right thing. You know what I mean? Like, Hunter might want power and all the rest, but he's not going about it in like purposeful and meaningful ways, other than just like satisfying that reward mechanism within his own body. Like, he's a slave to his biology and psychology, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like a party for him. It's just like fun. Like, I bet you he tells his buddies, dude, I was blowing lines the whole fucking night at the White House. You were doing cocaine at the White House? Yo, fuck yeah, I was. Oh my God, that's so hilarious. They're probably thinking it's a big joke. He probably.
But do you think he actually has any real buddies? Like, is it even possible to have a real friend?
Yeah, good question.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. What a wacky, crazy position to be in, man, for the president's son, a drug addict and a criminal.
Sex addict as well.
What's that?
Sex addict also.
Yeah, that's wild. I wonder how much of that Biden's into. Probably some of it, eh?
Yeah, I don't know. This is this weird thing. It's like there's a void there that isn't being met. Like, and he's trying to fill it, like clearly, like with the crack and the hookers and the guns and the this and the that and all the rest of it. Like, he's trying hard, but it doesn't seem to be quenching anything. You know what I mean? Like, he keeps having to try and push. Like, it seems as if he's just got to keep pushing the limits with all of these things. He's chasing some sort of feeling, like, and I think that's, like when you're younger, that's when you're exploring drugs. That's what you're doing too. You're you're searching for something more than what there is. Right. Whereas, and like that, there's, you can pursue that way of trying to find it, but I think it's like a fleeting thing. Whereas, like, I think that, the contrast I'd like to draw between the Elon is like, he seems to be building the things that has a chance of satisfying it. Or like his incremental process might fulfill him a little bit. It becomes real and meaningful. There's an analogy we could do. I feel like it's I don't know. I'll try and think on the analogy, but yeah, does that kind of make sense with the whole thing?
Absolutely, and we've seen Elon partake in smoking weed before, so it's not like he doesn't partake in that lifestyle either, right? But that's not his thing.
That's right. Well, I don't think smoking weed is going to help him, colonize Mars.
Yeah, it might.
You know what I mean? Like building rockets. Okay, yes, it may have some use, but in and of itself, that action isn't going to get us to Mars, right? Like, building fucking rockets that can get to Mars has a better chance of getting us to Mars than just smoking weed, right? I think that, like, maybe smoking weed with a couple of like other, interesting, smart, thought-provoking people and having some crazy, conceptual ideas, brainstorming some shit while you're a little bit high that could lead to some ideas that, create like that solve a problem or, come up with a solution to get us to Mars, no doubt about it. But it doesn't change the fact that you still got to building the rockets.
True.
And like, when he smokes weed, he's probably going to be less inclined to be building rockets. You know what I mean? Like, I know for myself, I'd much prefer to like, eat some food and relax.
He might need that though, eh? Elon probably needs a little bit of a break once in a while.
Bit of balance.
Yeah, who knows? He says he can't turn it off.
See what I mean about that? That's right. Yeah. So the way he can't turn it off. So the way he quiets it down is by actually doing shit.
That's
like productive, useful things. Does that make sense? Like he fills it by doing that. Like he occupies himself by doing those things. Whereas I think there's the other side of that is like you just continuously try and seek other people's approval and the rest of it. And it's like that drug addiction. It never gives you exactly what you want because you're looking for love in all the wrong places.
It's a great point. Yeah. That's true. What's the next thing you have on that list? We've gone through.
Yeah. We've gone through number 1.
Oh, fuck.
There's 5 more. Okay. So we have socio-cultural factors.
Yeah.
So cultural values and social norms. In cultures where success, wealth, and power are highly valued, individuals may be more driven to pursue these goals. The media and societal norms may glorify these pursuits, leading some to view them as ultimate symbols of success. And they can be in many cases, right? So neither good nor bad kind of thing. Social mobility and status. In some societies, the accumulation of wealth and power is closely linked to social status and mobility. People may pursue these as a way to elevate their social standing or to secure a more comfortable future for themselves and their families. I think they're novel things. But that kind of, is the middle of the pack. I'm really interested in these extremes, So we've got number 3, which is biological factors. So temperament and personality. Certain personality traits such as ambition, aggressiveness, or risk-taking may predispose someone to seek power and wealth. These traits may be influenced by genetics, upbringing, or a combination of both. So we know that it's always a combination of the both. And yeah, it's environmental largely. So philosophical and existential factors. The search for meaning and purpose. So for some, the pursuit of power and wealth might be tied to a deeper search for meaning or purpose in life. They may see these pursuits as a way to leave a legacy, make a lasting impact, or to fulfill a perceived destiny. And then we've got the last one, which is economic factors. So economic inequality. In contexts where there is significant economic inequality, the pursuit of wealth and power might be seen as a necessary means for security and stability, not just for oneself, but for one's family. And so I think that's all, useful and relatively true. Well, like, again, like I said, like I'm interested in these like extreme edge cases, Yeah.
And
so go.
The cultural one is interesting. For some reason, what came to mind was like a monarchy. People who are born into royalty have all the power, right? And that's sort of like
yes.
Would you say that that's a cultural thing? Is that a cultural?
What do you mean?
Yeah, or is cultural more like how they have tribes in Africa, and depending on where you are within that tribe, you get a certain level of respect. And I'm not really sure how you get the different positions within those tribes, but it's a very, what's it called, when a culture really respects different levels of power. There's a word for that. Hierarchy, yeah. Hierarchy.
Yeah.
Holy fuck.
Yeah, so hierarchies exist across, many systems. And yeah, like useful, like their hierarchies are, like you can't just get rid of it, so to speak. But yes.
But a cultural, hierarchy though.
Well, culture is like your greater context, right? So like, in Western society, it's like, becoming a doctor, or like, having a degree or being a doctor or an accountant or whatever, like that's cultural. Like at some level, like, that's successful for people. And so that might be enough. And so we have like all of this across all the different scales and all the different hierarchies. But yeah, the one that so I think that's part of a system, right? That these are part of a system. Like, so, you have cells in your body. Cells get together to create organs. They all serve a purpose. You could think of them as like your accountants, your plumbers, your this and your that, right? So they all come together to create a greater system. I'm interested in like those edge cases or like the extremes where it's like, the one cell wants to control every other cell in the body, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the group of cells becomes the brain, which is the nervous system to control the totality of the other cells, kind of thing, that kind of stuff. But you mentioned about the monarchy and somebody being born into power. Yeah, that's interesting as well, because like that person may or may not have a drive for the power, but because of family they're born into or the environment they're born into, it might get thrust upon them. And you think about your Hunter Biden, right? Like, given his dad and the way he grew up, how much of that led to him having the possible issues that he has.
Definitely. Yeah. Being born into power is really interesting, because being born into it, you don't really have, I don't think it would be difficult to have the sense of that you deserve it. It was just given to you.
Well, yeah, but you also might have entitlement where you just feel like, oh, I just deserve this because I am. Like, I do. Do you know what I mean? So
right.
I think you can go both ways. Guy, can we just have one quick bathroom interval?
Yeah, for sure, bro.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think I've got it. That I just had a possible epiphany while I was weighing.
Why you order your dick, guy?
Yeah, guy. That's the answer. No. So I think that so power, the allure of power exists because power is incredibly useful, right? And you can use it for like what people might define as good or bad things, right? But you could also think of it in terms of power is very useful, and you can use it to solve problems in your life that are immediate, superficial, and like reward system driven, like dopaminergic. Okay, or you could use it for grander things, on larger scales, for like all of humanity, or elevating certain groups of people out of horrible conditions, or solving problems that exist that you can see don't need to exist by solving those problems, right? Or coming up with solutions. And I think that when you do it for the first part of that, like the superficial, the short term, the dopaminergic or the reward system stuff, it typically ends up, quote unquote, not as useful or bad. Whereas when you do it for the other, that greater, the grander thing, where you have like some grander goal or vision in place, that's when I think it's more useful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
But yeah, ultimately, I think the allure of power exists because power is useful.
So going back to being born into power, that's where we left off when right before you went to the bathroom and had your epiphany after holding your dick. Like we were saying, being born into power, you are sort of given this responsibility that you didn't ask for. And then you said that could sort of stimulate, what was the word that you used?
Entitlement?
Yeah, entitlement. Yeah, exactly. So if you have power and you feel entitled to that power, man, that could be dangerous too, right? But
absolutely,
there's been well, I'm not really sure, but I think there's been many people who were born into power and actually ended up using it in a useful way, right? But I think it'd be a lot easier to sort of get that sense of entitlement and just don't really know what to do with it. But somebody who had to work really, really hard to sort of get into that position, Actually, no, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to use it for good either, though. Like it all comes down to
No,
the
that's right.
individual.
Correct.
Yeah.
Or you know, if you're a slave to your like if you're a slave to your vices, then and you're born into power, then it's probably not gonna end well. If your vices are, very superficial, shitty vices. Whereas if like your vice is like, wanting to solve nuclear fusion or colonizing Mars or some other thing, well then it's likely more useful.
So when has power? Like, can you think of a good example recently when power was used in an irresponsible or unethical way?
Yeah, there'd be heaps of examples of that. Uh, uh, the power of governments and medicine, pharma, et cetera. They use their power to essentially manipulate people into doing things or believing things that weren't necessarily true or as useful.
So I think, yeah, okay, I think you just said it. Anytime power is being used with profit gain as the main objective, it's not being used in a responsible or ethical way. Likely, right? If that's the primary goal is just profits.
Yes, I would agree with you. But I don't think like profits aren't bad in and of themselves, but just seeking them, I think, leads to bad things. Whereas if you're trying to solve like this problem, and that problem is a useful problem to solve for many people, then profits will be an indirect outcome of solving that problem.
Yeah, sort of
Or like, you go, sorry.
It's sort of a negative aspect of the free market, right? Because you're always you're going to be a slave to your investors in some way, and like your investors will likely only care about one thing, and it's lining their pockets. So you're going to be pressured to making some sort of decisions to secure that. I think that might be one of like the negatives about the free market, is that in many ways it can naturally go to this in this direction where it's all about the profits, all about the money, and you will likely have to make irresponsible and unethical decisions to secure that your investors are making their money.
And and that partially is because time horizons as well. So like, because you want it now. You want to be getting as much return on your investment as you can now. So you might be driven to do things that maximize for that, but then sacrifice the long term. So this gets back to your point of like, I want to be healthy, but like I've got to do unhealthy things so that I've got enough money to then be healthy.
Yeah. I'm not really aware of a better system than the free market though. Like I kind of like the way the free market works because, well, opportunities and anybody can sort of make it as long as they work really hard. But there's obviously negatives and positives to any system. And I'm not really aware of a better system per se. You know what I mean?
Well, yes, okay. So yeah, I think the free market is the gold standard. I think it probably is the gold standard. I just don't think we have a truly free market. I don't know if a truly free market can exist in that sense. But like, I don't think we have the greatest example. Like, I think it's when it's this, I don't know how to articulate it just yet. It's something I need to work on better. But so you can go about making money by solving genuine problems and providing usefulness and utility, right? But then you can also like, because that is a way of generating value and money, wealth, etc. Then you can also, and people know that that's a way of doing it. You can then also project or pretend as if you are and make it look like you are and gain those things as well. So like you can sort of, so there's always this battle between people that are really doing that and then people that are pretending to do it because it's also valuable. And I think that we go through these phases in societies and in cultures where we have times of like real genuine productivity increases and breakthroughs and the rest of it. And then we go through times when there's, like lots of exploitation around that. And it's not as productive, not as useful. And then we'll have another big breakthrough, and then that'll cause a whole nother thing. And then we have people exploiting all of that. And but yes, at the moment, I don't think we have, I think we have like a version of crony capitalism, which is like, the incumbents, and there's, it isn't as close to a free market as we could have.
Just going back to your epiphany, Rubes, basically we need to, I don't want to butcher it. Can you try and go over the epiphany that you had about the allure of power and how it can be useful and how we can make sure that it is being used in a useful manner? Well, how did you say it?
So I think the allure of power exists because power is incredibly useful. Okay. But you can use it for short-term superficial things, which might be useful for you, but aren't useful on a grander scale. Or you can use it for things that are, deeper, more meaningful, more purposeful, have a greater impact across larger timescales. And then it can be very useful, right? But that, like, the reason the allure for power exists is because of how useful power is. But then it can be used in many different directions. And so I think like the use cases where it turns out to be very useful is when people aren't doing the sort of, aren't just trying to satisfy their reward systems or their superficial vices. They're searching and trying to satisfy more deeper, meaningful sort of problems.
Wow. So we really do need people who don't want to be in positions of power to be in those positions and also act in a selfless manner at the same time.
Yeah, but and then on top of that, you can have people that act entirely selfishly, right? Like, Elon might be doing this entirely selfishly, but it just so happens that his selfishness also might have a greater good, might benefit society and humanity on a grander scale as well. But only because, like, he's sort of gone through and his selfishness isn't superficial or shallow or short term, right? It's actually a more deeper human problem, and his selfish pursuit, it leads to solving that for more humans. Kind of a bit tricky, but like that, I think that's what I'm trying to articulate. You know what I mean? Like, so you can still be selfish. Like, I think that's what you need, is you kind of need people who are selfish in a sense like that. But just, that have these grander, deeper, more meaningful existential things that they're trying to solve for. As opposed to like, the allure of power for some superficial, trivial sort of reason. Like, I just want to be fucking racking more coke all the time. Or like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're looking for more power because you want to be able to snort coke more, or sleep with hookers or whenever you want or whatever, I feel like that's kind of like that's a less useful that's a less useful reason to get power, right? Like that's only really benefiting you on a very short time scale, on a very superficial level as well. Whereas like if your allure to power is to solve deeper, more meaningful existential problems for humanity and society and life in general, then I think that's a more useful allure for power.
If anyone who's in a position of power is listening up until this point, maybe reflect on that. Ask yourself, are you in a power position, and are you doing it in a useful way, which is benefiting those around you? Or are you only doing it for selfish, short-term, what's the word? Superficial reasons. Yeah. Like that's something that we should all think about. Anyone who's in power, in any sort of power position, or wanting to be in a position of power, needs to really assess
definitely, because with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh,
And it's a big burden, right? And like you in some sense, you've got to trick yourself into thinking that you can handle that. When most people probably can't, but like trying to try with great power comes great responsibility. That's it. It's just a big thing. But the one thing I just want to hit on with what you said is the selfishness thing. It doesn't have to, I don't think that doing it for selfish reasons is always a bad thing. I think there are cases where doing it selfishly can actually end up being very beneficial to society as a whole, and life in general. So it's not just selfish. It could be, it's those selfish, superficial, trivial kinds of satisfactions. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're doing it just because you want a girl to like you or something like that, maybe not the most useful thing. But if you're doing it because you're like really fearful that humanity, we are the only light of consciousness in the universe that we're aware of, and we might extinguish ourselves, and that one way to minimize us extinguishing ourselves is to get to another planet, well, then that's probably a more useful driver for power.
All right. I think we're good, Guy.
Yeah, that's about it. I've tied myself in many knots. I got a lot to think about with this. We're going to need to do like a clarifying episode where we can more clearly go through this.
It's because it's so multifaceted, and there's so many. Yeah, there's just so many facets to it, and it's a much bigger topic than I realized.
Oh, it's huge. It gets to the heart of many things, which is why it's so hard to discuss, because there's so many nuances, and like you said, so many facets to it. But it's fascinating. It's something I'm obviously interested in, and I don't spend a huge amount of time thinking about it, but when I do it's fascinating. It really is.
All right, make sure you definitely don't describe. Describe.
Don't describe the video.
Yeah, definitely don't subscribe to the channel. Don't leave a like. Don't leave a comment. But if you do subscribe, it's the best way to let us know that we're idiots.
Correct. If you'd like to enforce enforce that, or communicate to us that we are idiots and that you support us in being idiots, then subscribe to the video. And thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a lovely week. Enjoy yourself. Peace out. Love you, Guy.
Love you, bro.
Have a good night.
All right, peace.